If there's one thing in this modern world that I feel like is ruining everything, it's private equity. There's honestly an endless list of companies and restaurants that have been completely ruined by private equity, and everyone's desire to skim as much money off the top as possible. One of the last things I want to see happen is private equity come anywhere near the sport of college football. It unfortunately looks like that is going to happen. It feels like now more than ever, the most important part about college sports is taking place off the field and in a boardroom. There have been some pretty crazy things happening to the college sports landscape recently, with things like Northern Illinois leaving the MAC to make more money in a conference where everyone else is hundreds of miles away. Sacramento State is trying to buy their way into an FBS conference, and not to mention all the crazy Power 4 realignment that happened over the last couple of years. But one of the most important decisions in college sports history could be around the corner, and that's the arrival of private equity into college sports. I'll start by giving a brief explanation as to what private equity actually is, so you will have a better idea of how it can be put into college sports. How private equity works is that a group of investors who have a lot of money and want to help a company grow and become better buy a big share of the company on the stock market. These investors work directly with private companies, businesses that are not listed on the stock exchange, and they invest their money into these companies to help them improve. They make them more successful, and then eventually sell their stake for a profit. It's like a team hiring a coach for one offseason to develop the players with his own resources. The coach doesn't stick around, but he still gets paid what he was paid every year. The team either wins more or loses, but they're still spending a coaching salary on that coach. The more money the coach makes without having to actually coach them. Private equity firms have been trying to get into college sports for quite some time, and it's pretty easy to see why. There is no greater television product in America right now than college sports, and there's not a college sport that commands as much attention as college football does. This would obviously be an opportunity for them to make more money, but private equity isn't all just positives. In fact, like any investment, there are risks that come alongside using it. As an athletic department putting their money into a private equity firm wouldn't be able to get that money back until the investment is done, which could be 5 or 10 years down the line, and the firm would keep their share of it. Essentially, the university would be out that money until it comes back with even more money than it left with, or it could lose money. There's also the general thought that private equity tends to ruin everything it touches because all the firm wants is a level of control over the company, and they want as much money as possible. In this case, that'd be teams or conferences, so you'd have a conference or a team that would have to meet the demands of the firm because the firm owns part of it. But since private equity isn't regulated as much as other investments, there's a chance it couldn't come back with much of an increase at all, meaning football programs would lose money in the long run. There's also the risk that using private equity would put a team in debt in the long run because they'd have to pay the firm to make those investments, and the firm's prices would go up over time. Plus, the larger inputs of a lot of private equity firms means that pretty much only power conference teams will be able to use them regularly, so the group of 5 or the group of 6 or whatever the heck it's called wouldn't have the same opportunities that other conferences would. The idea of conferences using private equity with their athletic departments actually arose from an idea that Big 12 Commissioner Brett Yormark told the media about last year. The Big 12 is one of the Power 4 conferences that is way behind the SEC and Big 10 in terms of payouts, so finding ways to essentially make money out of nothing was something that the commissioner wanted to think about. He revealed that the Big 12 was in talk with private equity firms to see if there was an agreement that would make sense with little risk for the conference. He said, quote, "I do believe that, given where we are in the industry, having a capital resource as a partner makes a lot of sense. We are exploring what it might look like and a structure and model of what that looks like, and it's going to be critically important that we're not compromising on the long-term future. We have surrounded ourselves with subject matter experts, and we're going to vet out all of the possibilities. Whatever we do is going to have a benefit to the conference, both short and long term, and provide optionality for schools." The conversation brought up the possibility of naming rights for conferences being sold, so there was a joke for a little bit about the Big 12 changing their name to the Dr. Pepper Big 12 Conference or something like that. But it wasn't long before it was more than just the Big 12 that was interested. The American Conference Commissioner told reporters the same thing in April of last year and in early 2025. News came out that the Big 10 was looking at private equity firms for their athletic departments, and Florida State was apparently approached by a private equity pitch, and that would have been interesting too. Forbes contributor Joe Moglia, who used to be the head coach at Coastal Carolina, wrote, quote, "College football is a ripe hunting ground for hedge funds and private equity." So in a few years, we could see athletic departments that are run almost completely separately from the university, and they are pouring money into hedge funds and firms in order to make more money down the line. The reason for this, as I'm sure you can guess, is NIL. Schools need NIL to attract and keep good players on their roster, and some schools like Montana State have to get creative with their NIL budgeting and have fans pretty much do it for them. But a lot of bigger schools have to get a lot of money to keep their good players, as just a few months ago, Nico Amaliava tried to negotiate for more money than what was agreed with between him and the University of Tennessee. Now, that didn't necessarily end up working out for him, since Coach Heupel showed him the door, and now he's at UCLA, but since all that was happening out in the open, we know that NIL money is an important thing that football teams are having to pay attention to, and are having to manage. Coaches are talking all the time about how much money they need to stay competitive, and it's a lot of it. That's why a lot of mid-range conferences are thinking about adding private equity to some of their team. The Big 12 won't be able to compete with the SEC or the Big 10 normally, aside from maybe Texas Tech because of their wealthy donors, so it makes sense that some of their teams will be looking into ways to make SEC levels of money without having the conference pay out the SEC teams have in order to get better recruits and transfers. It also makes sense why the SEC and Big 10 are generally against this usage of private equity for those other conferences. If you look at the teams that have won national championships lately, they are all really in the top 10 in terms of money. You have to have money to win a national championship, which makes you more money. Schools in the Big 12 or ACC or American probably see private equity as realistically the only way they can make money, and they have to have it in order to win a national championship in this day and age. NIL and the transfer portal did a little bit of that, since we saw teams like Indiana do really well this year and Bama take a step back, but I think what those smaller schools don't realize is that once they open the door to private equity, that means those bigger teams can get that private equity too, so it's all kind of a wash. But just a few days ago, the dominoes started to fall again, as just after the Big 12 decided to put their talks on private equity on pause due to concerns about financial safety, Boise State apparently announced that they are expecting a partnership with a private equity firm to happen by the end of the year. They created a focus group that's called Bronco Athletic Growth Solutions, or shortened to BAGS. The purpose is to search out ways to earn more money for Boise State athletics and the surrounding community. Athletic Director Jeremiah Dickey told the press, quote, "Ultimately, I need to create more assets for my institution and state. I have to get more creative, which means I have to take much more risk, and appropriately so. The economic arms race that schools have been in over the last 10 years or so has created an environment where athletic directors feel the need to sign their soul over to a corporation in order to compete." There are a lot of fans of smaller Power 4 schools or bigger Group of 5 schools that are excited about this new step because they feel like it would give their schools more opportunities to compete at the top, and if the investments end up working out, it could be good. But there are probably even more at the moment who are unsure about all this. A short-term cash infusion won't really do much good for a lot of them, especially if they're losing money up front, and it would harm the long-term growth of some of these athletic departments. Because they work by partial ownership, these firms would essentially own part of the athletic department, which is money those schools won't ever get back. It's a dangerous game and would take some smart decisions by athletic departments, and it's a little bit of a gamble that they're just hoping would pay off. Not all schools are ready to jump into it like Boise State though, as some news came out that 2 other schools were vetting private equity firms, and that included Penn State and UCLA. When the news came out, fans of those programs were concerned, with a few fans becoming angry enough that Penn State had to announce they weren't partnering with private equity at all, and were instead partnering with Elevate, which is a company focused on alternative income that will probably just end up raising ticket prices. Conferences and teams are looking at just about every way they can make more money, and private equity is just unfortunately one of them. These conversations will probably keep going for the next few years, and we'll see if a few teams actually sign on with these firms. Things like on-field advertisements and sponsors on jerseys are already things that are being considered for college football, and these things will only continue as the college football world continues to turn. But I want to ask you guys what you think about all this. How do you feel about private equity coming into the sport? What are the pros and cons? And if you're like me, I think this is dangerous, I think it's stupid, and it'll just hurt the product. As I said earlier in the video, if the small schools have access to it, I'm sure the big schools will have even more access to it. Why the heck would you invest in Fresno State when you could invest in Ohio State? You probably get a better return on investment in the Buckeyes than you do the Bulldogs, so eventually that'll just happen and everything will be ruined. I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but I don't want private equity getting anywhere near the sport of college football, and there's a good reason for it. But what do you guys think? You'll just have to let me know down below. Leave a like if you want to support today's video, subscribe if you're new, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. I hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.